Hello there, welcome to Proper DIY. My name is Stuart Matthews and today I'm going to be installing the Hozelock fast reel. I'm going to give you my thoughts on it and also maybe we'll find out what makes it fast. I mean, it doesn't look very fast to me at the moment. The Hozelock fast reel is a premium wall-mounted hose system that's supplied with a high-quality 40-metre long hose. Over the years I've got through many cheap hoses from the general DIY chains that have all ended up either being dumped in the corner of the garden or behind the shed. So I've always wanted a proper wall-mounted hose like this, just to keep things neat and tidy and available at a moment's notice. I chose this one in particular as I need at least 40 metres in length for the garden, and at the same time I wanted to avoid the more expensive self-winding type, which I can only see potential problems with as the spring wears. Talking about price, this is not a cheap option, coming in at £78 from Amazon, link in the description below. But then again, given that none of the alternatives are particularly cheaper, I decided to go with this one as Hozelock does have a good name in the market. So we just have a quick look at what we get. We obviously get the main unit that contains a hose and the handle. Obviously some instructions for use. We get a length of hose that connects the unit to the outlet pipe. Obviously some fittings and bits and bobs, screws and raw plugs. And I assume that's the guide that you put underneath it. And I think this is the bracket that we put on the wall, and it's going to go over there to fit the thing together. So let's have a quick read at the instruction manual and see where we go from here. So I've read the installation guide, and installation is very simple. The only thing it does say is that the insulation of the unit has to be within a metre of the outlet pipe. I don't know why it has to be within a metre. Maybe that's because they only give you 1.5 metres of hose to connect one to the other. So this is where I'm looking to put mine out the way, so within 1 metre that's absolutely fine. So the way the unit is fixed to the wall, it actually hangs on this mounting bracket. This is fixed to the wall by 4 screws, and it actually just hangs by its self-weight on the back. And the theory is that means in the winter when you're not using it, it's very easy to take off and store in your shed. It also means that when you go on holiday, your neighbours can steal it, but let's not worry too much about that at the moment. The unit is going here, so this mounting bracket has to be mounted here. So my main concern is the fixing into the wall. Now they do give you some fixings. I've got some quite thin but long screws. They give you 4 of those, and then they give you 4 very short raw plugs or unnamed equivalent of about 25-30 mil. Now I've got about 20 mil of render sitting on blockwork. Now I want my fixing to be actually fixed back into the blockwork rather than the render, which means that these raw plugs are far too short. So I think the first thing I have to do is go and find a better fixing. Okay, let's try this one. Oh, but I've got some. Here we are, these are the ones. Frame fixings. I think they'll do, won't they? So I finally found the fixing of my choice, and these are actually 8mm frame fixing, which is basically a big raw plug and a screw that goes into it. Now, the raw plug type thing doesn't go through the hole, so I'm going to have to drill a hole, fit it all the way in, and then this fits quite nicely here, giving me this much protrusion into the wall. So that's about 100 mil. That means I'll get nicely into the blockwork, which is where I'm wanting to go. Now, before I do any of that, I need to roughly understand where this is going. So this is the unit, and actually it's quite heavy, and as I said, the pipe hasn't got any water in at the moment, so I need to position it for my height and everything. This is a bit like offering up a picture on a wall. Now of course the next problem is that even though I offer it up to the wall, the fixings are halfway down here, so I have to sort of estimate where I'm going to drill. Why is it nothing ever straightforward? Okay, so I think I need it reasonably high so it's easy for me to use this arm, and all I'm going to do is just put a little bit of a mark at the top of this, and then I'm going to have to work out how far down I drill, so one step at a time. .180. Okay, so the holes are 180 mil lower than the top, so if I just measure down to the top row of holes, it's going to be plus or minus about there. Now I think it's probably sensible to get it equally spaced between this gas pipe and this drain, so the centre of this is 86, that's 43, which is just there. Okay, so I have a centre line just here and the first line here. Now the next thing we need to do is actually understand exactly where the holes are, and I've got a little trick that I'd like to show you because this makes life an awful lot easier. So I've got a nice level line across. I know where the first two holes are, but I don't know where the second ones are. And my favourite newest toy is this. It's called Marksman by Grip It. And what it does is when you push the end in, it fires a very small amount of fluorescent paint into whatever you're pushing in, which means that we can offer this up and potentially get an exact position without too much fuss. Have a look at this. There we go, we have 4 very well nicely defined fluorescent holes. So all I have to do now is to do some drilling. But before we start putting this into the wall, we have to think a little bit about if there's any services. Now generally on an external wall you won't have services buried into the wall, but sometimes you could have incoming electricity and gas coming into an area, especially at the back of the house. So just have a look around. I've already had a look at that. I know that I'm completely clear, so I think it's time to get going. So when I'm putting these type of fixings in any wall, although an impact driver is a great piece of kit, it can really run away with you. So the last turns always have to be by hand, and that's the only way you really understand what sort of fixing you're going to get. The thing with an impact driver is if you overdo it, suddenly you strip the thread, the plastic is broken, it's all gone in about half a second. So I do like to just finish everything off like this, just by hand, and now I can really feel what is happening on this bracket and what sort of fixing I'm getting, and that is actually quite nice. That is a good fixing and will last as long as me, or maybe even longer, probably longer actually. Let's just double check we've got it level before we go any further. Okay, so it's 1 millimetre down on the left hand side, and I don't think anyone's going to notice that, and I think that's fine with me. Let's just have a quick look. That looks good to me. So the last thing we have to install is this guide that goes underneath the hose and just fits on the wall here, just underneath, so it can be pulled in any direction. Although I do have a bit of a problem with the instructions on this, because the instructions say that this, the bottom bracket of this, should be fitted between 85 and a metre from the floor, which it is, but this bracket should be 60 centimetres lower. Now 60 centimetres is all the way down here, which I think is just too low. So I think I'm going to have to mount it a little bit higher, and that means that I'm going to ignore the instructions, which is, hey, sometimes what you have to do. The rest of the installation is now really straightforward, especially if you've used the Hozelock system before. The instructions tell you to fully remove the hose from the drum before the first use. I'm not quite sure why this is, but I did it anyway and water came out the end. The pack includes the Hozelock straight nozzle, which, although it works, is a bit on the cheap side and probably the first thing I'll change. Rewinding the hose is definitely easy, as the name suggests, with the mechanism underneath distributing the hose evenly across the drum as you wind. So, that didn't take too long, and it's pretty sturdy against the wall. The only thing I do have to do is just trim the length of this, which is a little bit over the top, but I'll do that quickly at some point. So quite impressed with this. I've wanted something like this for some time, so I've got it. It works really well. I like the way it runs through the roller, so it's extremely easy to pull out and very, very simple putting it back. And we found out what it's called the fast reel, because it's this automatic system where it actually distributes the hose left and right, which means it doesn't get all bunged up and it's nicely fitted out. So that's a really nice feature, and it saves you having to try to do it yourself. So all in all, very happy with that. That's going to be a good asset over the summer. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, please check out the other ones on my channel, which are DIY projects from all around the house and garden. If you're feeling really brave, please hit subscribe. So from a new hose owner with no excuse not to clean the car, see you next time.